Hi, I'm Paul of Escape into Film, and today we're going to be talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, if there was ever one genre or type of movie that was kind of impossible to make, it always feels like it's the video game movie. Not many, if any, have gotten it right up until even just a few years ago. I mean, when people think of video game movies, they think of things like Mortal Kombat from the late 90s, or even Super Mario Brothers. So it's already an uphill battle because the expectations are so low. And it has a lot to do with the fact that video games are beloved, especially by their fans. So you have a built-in audience of people who really love some property. I mean, they're two different media. You have video game, which is one platform, and you have film, which is another. And film is a very literal interpretation of the very loosely defined video game, especially back in the 80s and 90s, which is where Sonic comes from. So I'm pleasantly happy to be able to say that Sonic the Hedgehog is a nice little movie. It's a fun little adventure. You know, it's not that long. It doesn't overstay its welcome. And I think it's indicative of a trend where maybe, just maybe, we're hoping that video game movies are now kind of turned a corner. And maybe the end of the, Uwe Boll video game adaptation quality is over, and we'll actually get some enjoyable movies. They don't have to be masterpieces, they don't have to be films. But the challenge of the video game movie is that it has to be at least as pleasant as the video game is. I mean, people spend hundreds of hours playing these video games, so you understand why they're pretty defensive. And I think after the late 80s version of Super Mario Brothers, it showed just how terribly the movie can kind of transition, especially with the lack of technology back then. The reason this video game adaptation works is it's kind of a hybrid buddy movie and a road trip movie, ultimately. It's a very simple premise. Sonic somehow ends up on Earth. He meets a friendly human, and they have to get from point A to point B to retrieve some treasure. Now, the interesting thing here is it's a pretty simple movie, and it's actually a pretty short movie. It's only a little bit over 90 minutes, so it moves quickly. I'd like to say that the first act really establishes everything very nicely, especially if you're not entirely familiar with Sonic. This isn't like Pokemon, where I think, look, I'm a Pokemon fan, but you kind of really had to be in the whole Pokemon universe. You had to really understand what the different Pokemon were, and it was a whole thing. With Sonic, it's very simple. You have a fast character from another planet, and people are after him. And I think the simplicity of the framework actually benefits the movie really, really well. The film really lays out why Sonic has these rings, these little golden rings, which you collect in the video game. When I first heard they were going to make a Sonic the Hedgehog movie, I was like, how? That game is so bizarre. It's a super fast hedgehog running on some crazy levels, and he has to fight a robot guy. And I was like, how do you translate that into a feature-length film set on Earth? The Sonic movie is very, very basic, so you don't have to learn a whole lot. All you need to know is that in the game, Sonic collects these little golden rings by running really fast, and he has to fight robot monsters. It's basically the plot of the movie. Sonic has to go and recover his golden rings while fighting robot monsters. It is really about who Sonic is. I mean, you get this kind of sarcastic, glib, but very naive character. He's an alien. Yeah, most movies are plot-driven or character-driven. This one's kind of somewhere in the middle in the sense that it's a road trip movie, but I would say it's personality driven. And a lot of that has to do with its star, Sonic, who's voiced by Ben Schwartz. People know him as a character from Parks and Rec. I think his name was John Ralphio. You know, he's incredibly funny, and he does embody this alien who is very young, very naive, very sarcastic, and very glib. So you get this weird combination of confidence and just innocence. So he's driven by this urge to connect with people, and that is the heart of the movie because Sonic is an alien, and they don't really shy away from that. A lot of his story is driven by his sense of belonging. That is what kind of keeps the movie easy to connect to. The takeaway from this movie will be the return of Jim Carrey. A Jim Carrey who we haven't really seen since the mid-90s. And he is an eccentric, weird character. And it's great because the enemy, Dr. Robotnik, in the game, again, he's just this kind of egg-shaped bad guy who rides around in robots. Where's the character there? Well, what the movie does is establishes that he's a very eccentric, very arrogant character who believes that he is way above humanity because humanity's down here and he's way, way, way off there. And the great part of it is that Carrey finds a way to make him dangerous and very intelligent and very weird, very funny. He's a very extreme character. And I don't know that anyone maybe other than Jim Carrey could have pulled this character off. And like the video games, the movie is Sonic versus Robotnik, but the unsung hero of the Sonic movie will be James Marsden, who plays the normal hero, the guy who befriends Sonic the Hedgehog. He's just the small town guy who happens to kind of stumble across Sonic. Marsden is a really likable guy. He is the human you have to connect with on this insane journey. And I don't think Marsden gets enough credit that he probably deserves. I really liked him in Enchanted, that Disney movie from some time back. And in a lot of that movie, he was acting against a fully CGI chipmunk. He's another character who I don't know who I could have even imagined anyone else kind of in the role of. He is funny. He's warm, and you get the idea that he is a good guy on this crazy adventure. A lot of what makes Sonic work are its very defined and specific characters, which you really get engaged with. Now, for a movie that's this simple, again, you're just getting from point A to point B, the plot is actually a little bit too simple. The simplicity, though, however, means that the middle of the movie, the second act, really kind of meanders and comes to a kind of a slog at some points. Specifically, we're talking about a whole bar scene that just takes too long. I mean, it's a fun sequence to kind of watch on screen, but when you're thinking about where is this going, I have a plot, there's really a time element because Sonic is trying to get to point B, his destination, and pick up his treasure as soon as possible. Now we're sitting around eating chicken wings in the middle of a Montana. So it doesn't have a sense of urgency, which kind of kills the momentum. And at the end, I will say that the movie does feel like a video game. And I think it works in that respect because Dr. Robotnik does feel like the final boss of this kind of adventure that you're going on. And like any good video game, this movie does feel like it deserves a sequel. This feels like a very good origin story, and I really am excited to see where it goes from here. When all is said and done, I think the film does a really good job of capturing the essence of who these characters are. You really are excited to see where any potential sequels go, and it's actually, unexpectedly a lot more fun. I think the fact that video games movies have been so bad kind of lowered the expectations here, but I think that actually ups the degree of difficulty because other than Detective Pikachu and maybe a scant few others in the last 2 decades, for every one good video game movie, there's at least 20 or 30 or 40 really bad ones. But because the plot is so simple, and it does feel like it kind of meanders and stutters here and there, that kind of reduces the score a little bit. So at the end of the day, I think I'm going to go ahead and give this a 3 out of 5. All right, in the next few days, I actually have video reviews coming up for The Lodge and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. You can read all of my reviews at escapeinthefilm.com. You can follow me on Twitter at escapeinthefilm, and you can follow me on Instagram at escapeinthefilm. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and catch you next time.